Hi, Michelle Florendo here, and welcome to Ask a Decision Engineer. Listen in and find out how to untangle big decisions with less stress and more clarity. In the past few episodes, I've been talking about the three different components of each decision: your objectives, your options, and now on this episode, I'll be talking about information. I'll talk a bit about what I mean when I talk about information in decision making. I'll share a bit about why it is that this is the piece that causes the most stress for the most people. I'll highlight what are some of the mistakes I've seen people make when it comes to information in decision making. And finally, I'll share some tips on how you can become a better decision maker in how you use information in decision making. All right, so what do I mean when I talk about information in decision making? It may seem self-explanatory, but there is a little bit of nuance to it. When I talk about information in decision making, I'm talking about information that lies at the intersection of your objectives and your options. Or in other words, what information do you have on how each of these options may help you meet the objectives that you have? Let's take the decision of where to live as an example. Let's say that when deciding where to live, your objectives are affordability, proximity to key amenities like grocery stores and restaurants, and square footage. Information on things that don't matter as much to you, like proximity to parks and outdoor areas. If that's not on your objective list, it's not actually information that would be useful in the decision itself. Information and knowing how to appropriately engage with it is a critical piece of any decision. A decision without information isn't actually a decision at all. It's simply gambling, a roll of the dice. Yet on the other side of things, it is the potential lack of information that makes this piece the most stress-inducing part of decision making. And it's understandable. That ancient part of our brain, or lizard brain, as some call it, is hardwired to react to a lack of information. It prefers knowing, certainty, being able to predict the future. But that just isn't the world that we live in. Which brings me to the first piece that people get wrong about information and decision making. It's not about attaining a state of perfect information where you know everything and can foresee how everything turns out. Good decision making is in fact about how you move forward in the face of partial and imperfect information. It is unreasonable to make it a goal or even an expectation to know everything. The goal is not clairvoyance, because as humans, that just isn't an achievable state. I don't know about you, but I don't know anyone who can predict the future perfectly. And so why is it that so many people make that an expectation, either as they're looking forward to decisions or when they're looking backward on what they should have known? The more comfortable people can get with making decisions in the face of imperfect information, the better they will get at decision making. The second piece that I see people getting wrong about information in decision making is mixing up the unknown versus the uncertain and what you should do in response to each. I was once coaching someone who was thinking about the next phase of his career and was just a whole ball of, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. It was something that he repeated on our calls so many different times. And it took a little bit to dig into, well, what were these pieces that he didn't know? Did they fall in the bucket of what I call unknowns, things that are knowable with enough research or effort, but you just don't know now? For example, will this company be a fit for the culture I'm looking for? Or was he nervous about things that were uncertain? So things that you cannot possibly know until it happens, like when the pandemic would end and people would go back to offices. When you're dealing with unknowns, things that can be known, an action you can take is to do your research. However, if you're dealing with something that is uncertain, the best that you can do is assess the likelihood of something happening or not. When you mix up what is unknown versus uncertain, and you take the wrong actions to resolve each, it isn't productive and can possibly be really frustrating. So when you're dealing with a lack of information, it's useful to figure out whether you're dealing with something that is knowable and unknown, or something that you couldn't possibly know until it happens, an uncertainty. Another place where I see people get tripped up in this information piece of decision making is how they assess the value of information. Here in the United States, we live in a society that values more information and knowing more. However, not all information is useful. As I said at the beginning of this episode, information that doesn't relate to the intersection of your options and objectives isn't really useful in the context of decision making. Also, in general, information that would not change the course or affect which choice you choose to employ doesn't have value. And yet so many people are tempted to seek out more information that isn't actually valuable. When you are able to identify what type of information would be valuable, would actually influence the course of your decision making, another thing to consider alongside the value of that information is the cost of getting that information. All information comes with a cost, whether it's time, money, or opportunity cost. And to be blind to what those costs are is to skew the value of information. You may find yourself in a situation where, yes, there is information that is valuable out there, but it isn't worth the cost of getting it. And so you might as well make the best decision you can with the information you have right now. The final mistake that I want to talk about today when it comes to information and decision making is this fear of making the wrong decision. I've seen so many people paralyzed by this fear of making a wrong decision. And it comes from one, thinking that they are forever doomed by this wrong decision. And also thinking that, something that produces a bad outcome makes it wrong. Again, the quality of a decision is separate and distinct from the quality of the outcome, because an outcome is a function of not only your decision, but also of factors that are outside of your control. So instead of falling victim to this huge fear of making a wrong decision, one thing that I would offer up is that it's more important to be resilient than right. Because if you can be resilient, and even after experiencing a bad outcome, can look to where can you make a new decision, that is the skill that in the long run will drive you towards the objectives that matter versus sitting in the paralysis of trying to get things right. Now that I've covered the various mistakes I've seen people make when it comes to leveraging information in decision making, let's talk about the ways that you can avoid some of those traps. Ask yourself, are you being realistic about what information you can collect before you need to make a decision? How can you make peace with the fact that you'll likely need to make a decision without perfect information? Of the things that you don't know, what are things that fall in the unknown bucket versus uncertainty? Which things are researchable and which are not? Where are the researchable gaps that will make the biggest difference in which option you choose? And once you identify what pieces of information are most valuable, ask yourself, what are the costs of getting that information? And is it worth it? In the face of a fear of a bad outcome, how might you de-risk the situation by either reducing the magnitude of the unfavorable outcomes or reducing the likelihood of those unfavorable outcomes. If you do end up in a situation where you face a bad outcome, what is the tripwire you'll set for when you'll reevaluate whether you can make a new decision? Dealing with the information piece of decisions can be challenging. But if you're committed to practicing, engaging with information and the lack thereof, being able to make decisions in the face of uncertainty, it's a skill that'll carry you forward in the rest of your work and the rest of your life. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you know of someone who might benefit from learning more about how to make good decisions, please send them a link to our website, acadecisionengineer.com. The website, acadecisionengineer.com, is also the place to go if you're interested in more resources on decision making or would like to submit a question to potentially be answered on a future episode. Again, this is Michelle Florendo from Ask a Decision Engineer. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.